So, yeah. It was uncomfy. That was also just a bad semester for me. That was the semester that my medication was making me like throw up. Do you want to play with it? You can take it with the teacher.
That doesn't. Okay. Emily will not be here. She is ill. And that's fine.
Who?
Emily.
Mm.
Hi guys. We are missing Kara number 2. Has anyone heard from her?
One of my close friends' boyfriend at the time.
Has anyone heard from the other Kara?
But we also, or I at least don't necessarily.
She doesn't live here either.
Kara M. You're Kara M. Right?
Yes.
Okay. B.
She lives on campus.
I thought she was on campus. Oh, she does?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
For some reason,
I was like,
thought we had.
she's
we had
from
a
Texas.
conversation about being. Okay, maybe that's what it was.
She's from Texas, so.
This is a hard one.
Hi guys.
Yeah, it's kind of annoying. Also,
How was your reading this week?
I thought you said eating.
We can talk about that too.
That's a whole different class.
That is a different class. Affects children. Yeah, how was the reading for this week?
Good.
Everybody caught up?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're not caught up, catch up because you don't want to get too far behind and, you know,
What is your
eventually.
policy on late work?
As stated in the syllabus,
Lord.
Remind me what is stated in the syllabus.
I believe what's stated in the syllabus is a policy around if you have an emergency, please talk to the professor ahead of time. Otherwise,
Okay. ...
I think it's
There's
one
more
letter.
information.
No, if it's a day late.
Now the reading, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. I'm still kind of figuring out because, like I said, I set this class up from like a very blank canvas. There was nothing there. So the reading is not graded week by week, but if at the end, you know, I look back and let's say student named David, we don't have a David in here, has not turned or not completed their reading every week, I might take points off of the binder at that point.
Okay.
So I'm still working on a rubric for the actual binder, which is not super helpful for this question in this moment. But to answer your question, try and get it done.
So it's not graded at the end of each week?
There's
two
no
grades?
points in Canvas under the reading tab,
Oh.
but your grading will be every element of the class will be graded at the end in your binder. That is the final submission. So if, you know, since reading will fall under the binder, you haven't been completing your reading, that's where I would ask honestly, like, please report your reading for the class. So you might
Okay.
want to be keeping track.
So then, in that case, since I didn't do the journal, in that case, I should do the reading, but the journal would be late and...
You should do the reading and then do the journal and turn it in.
Okay. Will you still give points for the journal?
Yes, I'll still give you points.
Okay.
It probably won't be 25.
That's fine. That's totally fine.
Yes.
And that's what I was asking, because Dr.
Yes.
Smith, no points.
I turned something in.
So,
We had a
midnight.
Mr. Smith and he was similar.
We loved him. He's amazing,
Yes.
to be fair, but, you know.
No, yeah,
If you turn something in late, you're screwed, so.
Yeah. I'll still accept it, but I
Okay.
think the syllabus policy is that every day late there's a percentage off. So I'll review that before I actually grade it and make sure I give you a fair deduction.
Cool.
But please get it in quickly.
Yes, I will.
Yes, for your sake. Okay. My brain is a little bit scattered tonight, so bear with me. That might just be me on the regular, I don't know at this point. Grad school kind of fried me. Yes, okay, so I want to hear your thoughts on the 2 chapters that you read from Bruce Perry. It was 3 and 4.
3 and 4.
Skin Hunger and and Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah.
The chapters in this book are very Interesting.
Yeah.
Skin hunger, for one.
Explain. I do actually want to have a dialogue about this, so I'm going to make you
just
talk.
that, and I want to giggle when I read them because they're kind of like, what is that? What is that about? When I was reading the chapter 3 the other day, and I looked ahead to see how many pages I had left, and I saw skin hunger. I was like, oh. And then and now flipping through it, I see satanic panic. It's just nice little alliteration situation going on.
These are real situations.
Yes.
Yes,
And
they are.
that's, yeah.
Humanity's really weird. I don't know if that answers your thought, but yeah. So sometimes I have come across case studies that I was just like baffled by. Did not know that could exist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It does.
The Branch Davidian was interesting because I had heard. I mean, I kind of knew about it because there's been like news, and if you end up going down a rabbit hole of watching Netflix documentaries about various different cults, Branch Davidian tends to come up, and so it was interesting to see it from his perspective, though, too.
On the outside.
Yeah. Well, on the inside, really, of him.
On the outside of the cult, on the inside of the therapy.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so I thought it was the fact that he was like forethinking about how if we engage further with, like infiltrating their camp and rescuing them, then it's gonna end up in balls of fire, and him like repetitively advising the law enforcement on that, it just reminded me so much of the foster care system. Like it just did, cause
That was from the art drawings that the kids were doing, right? That he picked up on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it's kind of like, and then in contrast to one of our first ones, which was that they wanted a child to testify, and that still was communicated through play, interpretation of play. But then in this case, when play was being used or drawing was being used to communicate something, the law enforcement was kind of like, no, I don't want to hear it. Like, I'm not going to listen to you. And so that was an interesting thing. Also, how the kids went back and forth between like, okay, we're forming some kind of attachment with this, and then as soon as the second, like, I'm sure they probably had CPT, I don't speak English,
CPS?
complex post-traumatic stress.
Okay. Just say PTSD.
Yeah, PTSD, but like multiple levels of it though, right? Like this one, and then that one, and then that one, and then that one, and then that one, right? So many different things that triggered them back into where they were before, even to the point of like separating with boys and girls and things like
Yeah.
that. So that
Yeah,
was
well,
really
when
fascinating.
you're in a new situation or a scary situation, even something that's awful, if that's your pattern, that's what a child or a human brain will revert to.
Yeah.
So they're in a new situation, no adult is there from their old group to tell them what the rules are, so what do? Follow procedure.
Right.
And that's neurological, that's also social. There have been all kinds of social experiments testing if you bring someone in and you show them this is the pattern of behavior, and then you take out all the people who taught them that, will they continue doing it? I saw one recently where a woman came into a waiting room, and for no apparent reason, like every minute or so, everybody would stand up and then sit down. And they had people planted to do this around her. And then one by one, they'd funnel the people out and bring new people in. And eventually, she was the only one who had been there in the beginning, and she was still doing it. Every minute or so, she'd just stand up. So it's the same thing. Like these kids, they have been trained that this is how you do things, and probably a lot more stringently. But they've learned very complicated patterns of behavior.
Right.
And that's what they follow now. It'll take a lot of therapy for them to undo the patterns of behavior training that they've received.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that his like solution was just nurturing safe environment structure of a different kind was fascinating to me too, because you like, I don't know, from a bachelor's level, I'm looking at this going, holy crap, this is a huge problem. How on earth would you solve this? And I just liked how he went about solving it.
Yeah. The next two chapters are really interesting. I mean, I have a hard time because every chapter in this book is fairly fascinating to me in each individual ways. The next two chapters are the chapter about the title, where that title comes from, and a chapter about a 16-year-old who murdered two teenage girls, preteen girls. So that's the one we're going to do a case study on tonight. But I digress, because we're going to still process what you've read so far. I want you to think back about the last 4 chapters you've read from Bruce Perry's book. What was the most, I don't want to say uncomfortable, but maybe upsetting story or element that you read that stuck in your mind?
I think for me, chapter 2 was like really, really stuck with me. Like just that like image of like this. Oh my goodness, I can't even remember how old she was. Like
We're talking about the one with the mother who died.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sandy.
Yeah. I think she was like 3 when it happened. Is that
3
right?
when it happened, 4 when she met Bruce Perry.
Like just the image of like her like drinking the milk. It's like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I had that same reaction the first time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, which now that you know that, it makes a lot of sense why she has a triggered reaction to milk. I was thinking about like what would be the best thing for us to focus on this week. This is like one of the things that I want to talk about, but the importance of taking a history. And that will come up when we do our case study, because nobody could figure out what was going on with this case or had a reason why until a really good history was taken. And it's the same thing like Laura and Virginia. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with that little girl until someone took a really good history and figured out what was going on attachment-wise. What else from the first 4 chapters of the book? I can even broaden this out to things that you just have more questions about or feel confused by or need to process. What do you guys think of Mama P's parenting style? That was a really satisfying ending to that story for me. They're not perfect, and like Bruce Perry talks about, you know, Virginia isn't necessarily going to be the most normal, warm human being on the face of the earth, but she was able to parent her second child much differently than her first child and give that child everything it needs.
I think something that stuck out to me in the last couple of chapters is actually something that was mentioned to me just previously to taking this class, is that sometimes ADHD symptoms can look, or like trauma symptoms and ADHD symptoms can kind of sometimes look similar. And I think, and I was like, huh, that's really interesting. And then reading him, I don't remember which chapter, if it was 1 or 2, but one of the kids in that one that was like reacting really harshly and just, I think it was the first chapter, but was just, you know, had a terrible behavior issues, and his mentor was like, well, she's got these symptoms, she's doing these things, ADHD and oppositional divide disorder.
And yeah, that one maybe is my least favorite because people will use it in place of a better fit.
Yeah, exactly. And like that's why it's so important to like really take the last part of like every single DSM diagnosis, which is unless another one fits better. And so again, what you're saying of like taking a look at the history, because it matters why we're doing the things that we're doing. Because if we're just treating ADHD symptoms rather than getting to the root of why are you behaving this way, why are you not being able to pay attention, why are you acting impulsively, all these different things, then you're not really going to change the problem in the long run.
Yes. Yes.
Or help the person, which is really the biggest thing. So
I've got several new clients in my caseload in the last week or two. And one of them, I know that this child has ADHD on their chart. Like, that was a recent diagnosis from a trained professional. Okay, fine. That's the symptoms we're looking at. But there's more to the story, and mom hasn't been able to provide that to me yet. But when you get to a certain point in your profession, and I'm just getting there really, you start to develop a ability to look at a situation, go, okay, yes, this is present, this is present, but there's a trigger point, and I can see the trigger point when you describe the history to me. What happened? There's not always just a simple answer. A lot of times there's a more detailed history that needs to happen. There's something that parents aren't aware of. There's a bigger issue that hasn't been uncovered yet. So when I look at this 5-year-old boy on my caseload, like, something's missing from the picture. I do not feel like I have the whole picture when you're explaining this about your child. And then she didn't come back, so that also gives you kind of a question mark. Why is she nervous about coming to therapy? So, no. All right. Anything else from the last 2 weeks of reading?
I think from the first chapter, or For Your Own Good, whichever chapter it is, maybe that's the second chapter. When he has Sandy, the Sandy chapter. He said to restore its equilibrium, the brain tries to quiet our sensitized, trauma-related memories by pushing us to have repetitive, small doses of recall. It seeks to make a sensitized system develop tolerance. And then he talked about her reenacting her memories and stuff. And so my question is, will kids always reenact their trauma? Or is there a way to always get a kid to be able to reenact their trauma? Like maybe they're more so dissociative or something like that, and then you can kind of process with them so they can come back online a little bit and then get them to process their trauma that way? Or will you have to find other ways to help them process their trauma? Or like...
No, they will not always process their trauma very visually like Sandy did with Dr. Perry. You know, she showed him exactly what had happened, what she'd witnessed, and, you know, as best she could through play. Not every child is going to do that. Some of them are going to shut down. And, you know, when you were saying that, I was thinking about another case study that we talked about when I did these classes. But I digress. We'll come back to that. So no, they won't always give you a really big picture, but there will be symptoms. There will be, you know, like maybe they're wetting the bed. You know, there's going to be something. Maybe they're having tantrums every day at 4 p.m. You know, they might not be playing out their trauma, but there are going to be signs that something happened to disrupt their life. And so, like, you have to get a full history, a good history, and be really curious and ask a lot of questions. Because, you know, take a less extreme example, maybe, you know, a child puts a sticker on, you know, the crotch of a baby doll, and you're like, what does that mean? You know, like, that seems very sus. What happened to this child? Maybe they witnessed something. It might not have been them. So you like equally have to be curious and ask questions, and, you know, be open to the possibility that there might be several different answers that fit and you just have to keep working with the child and keep talking to the parents and work with the school and basically, you know, all the different, if you are her therapist, you really should be talking to the people that she spends the most time with, which would include her teacher, her mom, her dad, and get all the pieces of the puzzle, you know, without jumping to quick conclusions. You don't want to overdiagnose or underdiagnose.
Makes sense.
Her saying something about the, you know, kids always acting it out or whatever,
Mhm.
reminded me that, like, a week ago or something like that, my husband and I were watching Bluey,
I've heard about it.
which is
Yes,
a
a couple of
wonderful
Mhm.
pastime for us. We've been doing it for over a year now. Just whenever we need something that's cute, we watch Bluey.
Noted.
So there's this one episode where the main character Bluey, who is like 6 at the time, she goes with her dad on a walk, and they find a bird that is injured, and they take it to the vet, and the vet has to be like, I'm sorry, this bird has died. And then Bluey like freaks out, and she
Yeah.
doesn't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
So when she goes home, her little sister Bingo is like, let's play. And Bluey's like, I don't really want to play. But then Bingo kind of gets her to. And so she's like, fine, this is what we're going to play. You're going to be a bird, and you're going to die. Or you're going to get injured, and then we're going to bring you to Mom. And so she's like, Mom's the vet. And she goes to Bingo, and she's like telling her sister what she needs to do. She's like,
Yep.
no, you're supposed to be hurt. You can't talk. You're supposed to be hurt. And then she brings her to the vet. And then the mom's like, good news, the bird's all better. And Blue's like, no, you're supposed to say that she's dead. And she's
Yeah.
even like repeating all the things like her dad was saying when she was doing it. And I was like, this is play therapy. And I've noticed that they do that in a couple different episodes where one of them like reenacts what they've seen.
Kids do reenact
And just in
mimic
general, yeah.
life a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I had one client a few years ago who used a lot of words that no child should know. It's like, where is that coming from? She's witnessed, she's heard it. Like, it doesn't come out of nowhere. So if you see a child pretending something has died, be like, hey, Mom, has anything in the last year or two passed away? Or, you know, like, you're going to start asking questions because it doesn't usually come out of nowhere. There's an origin story. And in that case, it was a dead bird.
Yeah. And then
Yep.
she was, by the end of the episode, she was like, okay, this happens. It's okay. It's part of life.
Yes. Sometimes kids play out those things at home with their parents because they're processing.
Yeah.
And kids, again, they talk through play, which is just another way of saying they're processing through
Yeah.
play. Okay, so the case study, not this case study, but another story that was a case study that I heard about a few years ago that really stuck with me because of how memorable it was another story about a child reenacting their trauma. And the difference between this story and that and the Sandy story and this story is that we knew, Bruce Perry knew basically what had happened before he met with her, whereas there was very limited information about what had happened with this child. So, and it was less violent. But the story was about a small little boy who was coming into play therapy. He used to live with his mom in a different city. His mom passed away, and he was taken to live with his aunt in a different city, and I think even a different state, so quite a ways away. So he wouldn't talk. He was nonverbal, and she began to take him to therapy. And it was the kind of therapy room where there's a glass wall so you can witness what's happening on the other side. And what was going on in, like, I don't think this was even the first session, more like the third, fourth, or fifth session, was this little boy took the hand of the therapist and he, took her over to the middle of the room, had her lay down, and arranged her so that she was on her side, like bent knees, like put her how he wanted her. And the caveat to this was because there was a window and there was one or two people witnessing what was happening, the therapist allowed this to happen because it was therapeutic for the child and it wasn't inappropriate per se. but there was witnesses to provide accountability. The little boy arranged her where he wanted her, and then he laid down. I can't remember if he was behind her or in front of her, so that he was like wrapped around her as well, in the same like shape.
So like spooning.
Yes, I was trying to avoid saying the word spoon.
Oh, okay,
but
sorry.
It's fine. Basically, you know, he was wrapped up with her, either behind her, I think, in front of her. And what they were able to piece together after he had gone to therapy for a while, and they began to witness this processing of play. I mean, play is a very loose term when they're not playing; they're just showing you. Was that his mom had passed away in their apartment, and he had been alone with her for, I think, several days.
Oh wow.
And so what he was showing the therapist was that this is how he coped with being alone with his dead mother for several days in the apartment. Is he would, hug his dead mother to himself. So, kids do process their trauma through play. Some of them are a lot more obvious than others. But without that information, it's really difficult to help them move past it. So that story really stuck with me. And I've been thinking about all week and wanted to tell you guys about it. So you can be as sad as I am. Anyway. Okay. We're gonna watch a couple videos, which means that I have to put the video on break so that we can watch the videos on YouTube. YouTube won't be mad at us. So for online students, I will publish the page on Canvas at the end of class, and you will go there and see the videos that we're going to watch. So we'll put you on break and go watch the videos, and then we'll return after we finish the videos. Yes, she does. She returns to interacting with her child and gets her child calmed down and readjusted to, yes, I'm here, I'm present. But that's a good lead into our case study. So we're going to talk about our case study now for this week. And we're going to do The Coldest Heart, which is chapter 4, I believe, or 5. 5. Let's make sure I got the name right on this kid. Leon. So we're going to talk about Leon. There are 2 chapters for this week. Leon and Justin, which is the boy who was raised as a dog. But I read both this week and decided that we're going to talk about Leon because they're both good case studies if you're talking about attachment to look at. But Justin's story moves quickly from what he experienced to the treatment. So I felt like that would be a good pace for you guys to read through that one. Whereas Leon's story, I read it this morning and I'm still processing it myself. So we're going to talk about Leon because I think there's more there that could be processed in a classroom. So this 16-year-old boy, well, what we know and what Bruce Perry knew at the beginning was that a 16-year-old had murdered 2 young teenagers, a 12-year-old and a 13-year-old, in his building and was in prison for it. So he's in a very high-level prison as well. And Bruce Perry was brought in to do an evaluation before his final court to see if there are any mitigating factors that would give room for the judge to give him life in prison instead of the death penalty for the murder. Because there was no doubt that he had committed the murder. The question is, is he crazy? Is he insane? Like, is there anything to argue that he shouldn't die for what he's done? So Bruce Perry goes in and meets Leon, 16 years old, or I guess this might have been a year or 2 later, so I think he was actually 18 at the time that Bruce Perry meets him. He murdered the 2 young girls when he was 16, and begins to interact with this teenager and ask him questions about his life in prison, and eventually, further in the conversation, he asked him what happened. And Leon, downplays the story of what happened very much, and shows no remorse for his actions, or there was more to it than just murdering them. But he has no remorse for his actions and no concept of empathy or anything like that. And so when Bruce Perry asked him, kind of a generic question, like, if you could go back, what would you do differently? Which a lot of people would respond to a question like that with, I wouldn't have lost my temper, I wouldn't have done this, I probably would have stayed home that night, I wouldn't have gotten drunk, which Leon was drunk. Instead, he just says, I would have gotten rid of my boots because there was blood on my boots, and that's how they caught me. So no remorse, no even part of his brain tells him that he should at least pretend to be remorseful over the murder of these 2 girls. So in that conversation, Bruce Perry's not able to figure out what led from a boy whose family is healthy and normal on paper. That's what Bruce Perry knows so far is, there's no other crime in the family aside from Leon, to Leon at 16 having the rage and the anger to murder 2 young girls. So he goes and he does what every therapist should do, which is to take a detailed history from the family. So he speaks with Maria, who's the mother. I'm trying to remember the dad's name, but I'm forgetting now. And then Frank is the 4 years older brother of Leon. Frank is everything that Leon should have been. He's successful. He's got a job, stable job. He's a plumber. He's married. He has his own kid. You know, he's totally different story from his brother. And so when you're looking at a case and you have two brothers who developed completely differently, it's really easy to just assume that if they're raised in the same family, that the issue is not the family, right? Maybe it's genetic. And Bruce Perry goes through all of the different areas. Like, is it genetics? Is it environment? Is it family? Like, what is the lead-in to this behavior? And what he is able to ascertain after interviewing the parents is that he asked them, you know, when did you fall in love? Where did you meet? They met in high school. They grew up in a religious community. They had a lot of support, a lot of family. So when they got married, and Maria was fairly young, maybe 18, they had aunts and uncles and cousins who were all involved in their life, and it was a very supportive environment for them to begin their life. And then she had her first baby, and she had, you know, mom and aunts who would babysit for her, or who would come over and hang out with her and the baby. So even though sometimes she would be stressed by having a baby, she had tons of support to help her with Frank, the older brother. And mom is described as maybe being a little bit simple, and I think that may have been the word used in the book. Mom didn't do super well in college, or not in college, she didn't go to college. In high school, I think she stopped somewhere like 8th grade and then got a job as a maid. And so her parenting style was maybe a little naive, not very educated. So, you know, having the relatives for those first 4 years of Frank's life was really helpful so that she could get through the infant stage and was able to get to a stage where she was more friendly with her son. Just meaning that she was able to have conversations with him. They did a lot of things together. They'd go to museums. They'd go to church lunches while Dad was working, and Dad was busy working for quite a bit of the time. So what ended up happening is Dad lost his job at the factory he worked. And when Frank was something like 3 or 4 years old, they had to move to a completely different city where Dad found a new job, which took away one very important factor, which is the community that they had at home. All of the family, all of the relatives, they even lived in a building owned by Maria's uncle, so they had a lot of support in their life. And when they moved to the new city, it was a very different environment. It was very fast-paced. There was a lot of people who are transient or, you know, all coming in from different cities, and they didn't have any support whatsoever except for the local communities that Mom would go to. So no support at home, but she had some places that she would take Frank to during the day. She would take Frank to a church, and they'd pick up food, you know, at the grocery store, and they'd go to museums. So they had things that they would do, and they would go on these walks every day. They would walk, you know, to the park. They would walk to the museum or take the bus, and they had a very comfortable pattern of not being home during the day while Dad was working. So she got pregnant again, and she had Leon, and he was a colicky baby, so he cried a lot. He wasn't very happy. And after about 4 weeks, she began to resume her walks with Frank, which meant, in this case, that she did not have the wisdom to know that leaving a baby at home while you take a 8-hour walk with your 4-year-old is a very bad idea. So that's what she did for quite some time. I'm not sure exactly when that stopped, probably around the time he started going to preschool. So Leon was from the age of 4 weeks, anon, left at home during the day. After breakfast, Maria and Frank would leave. She would feed him and change him and then leave. And he would spend the entire day by himself. And so what's happening for an infant when they're left alone and their needs are not attended to is they're going to cry at first. But at some point, they're going to realize that crying does not equal mom coming to meet my need. So they're going to stop crying. So this is one of those stories that I struggle with, because when you meet Leon at the beginning of the chapter, I have very little empathy for him. Very little room. I am not built for prison ministry. I've thought about this many times. The Lord will send someone else, because my heart is way too soft to talk to somebody who's harmed another person. So when I hear a story about a 18-year-old, he was 18 when Bruce Perry met him, who's murdered a 12-year-old and 13-year-old as brutally as he did, it's really difficult for me to find room in my heart to have empathy. But this chapter is very interesting, because when you look at the start in life that Leon had, you really just see a baby, because that's all he was. And what happened to this baby was traumatic and created a very broken attachment style, which you'll read about this week, which created a little boy who was aggressive and who didn't want to be touched and didn't like being touched and would reject, hugs and things like that, and was quickly put into an environment in preschool where he was in a special daycare with other problem children, which meant that now a problem child is learning new behaviors from other problem children. And so what happened for him is he learned what other people expect socially. He learned how to walk and talk, which he wasn't walking and talking properly at 2 years old, because he spends a lot of time alone. And so he learned all of the behaviors that eventually led him to be an aggressive, unsafe person. So one of the things that Bruce Perry talks about in this chapter is, he calls it two things. Some people call it the butterfly effect, but better picture, and another thing that it's called is the snowball effect. So it's the idea that one small choice here and one small choice here and one small choice here can turn into a much bigger issue as time goes on, and those seeds that were planted become very dangerous and unhealthy behaviors by the time they're a teenager. So 4-week-old, left alone during the day, puts into a preschool with a bunch of other children who are not in a good place, learns about gang violence, learns about, all of these things that a child probably shouldn't know about. And when you put those factors together and you give it 16 years, what ended up happening was a 16-year-old was capable of raping and murdering 2 children, 13 and 12. So that's what you're going to do your case study assignment on for the week after you read the rest of the chapter. I had a really hard time getting through this book the first time I read it. That's part of why we're doing case studies each week from the book, because I want to give you guys a chance to talk about this and process it as we go through the book. Because some of these I found quite upsetting the first time. So, what do you guys think about that story?
It's really cool to me to see, like, I just feel like I'm constantly reminded that there's always a reason when people do things, even if they don't know what the reason is themselves. Mm-hmm. And I think, like, as Christians, we always think God calls us to forgive and give people grace and give people second chances and to be compassionate and, you know, all those things. And I think something that I almost wish the Bible would, this is heretical for me to say this, but would do a better job of like saying like why we should do that. Like it's just cool to see real world examples of like, hey, this person's really not that much different than you are. They also, like their parents maybe weren't as well equipped as your parents.
Yeah.
If they ended up in a worse spot than you are, or their community, or their environment.
This word is overused maybe a little bit in our culture, but privilege.
Yeah.
We have,
Yeah.
some of us, the privilege of being raised. I have the privilege of being raised by a mother who is very warm and very intelligent and always kept me clean and always fed me and never abandoned me and made sure I was hugged and kissed and played with and had friends and was never left alone. So in some ways that gives me a huge advantage over other people that I've been friends with or have met in my life who have experienced very different mothers. But yes. And as far as the Bible goes,
I was obviously being a little bit jokey, but
Yeah.
it's just cool to like see.
yeah.
What I want to say is like a secular reason or like just the real world coming together with what the Bible's just telling us to do, and like
I think
I don't know.
my perspective is that the Bible is two things: a compilation of stories where you can see healthy and unhealthy patterns because they were humans too, and these patterns of behavior still existed 2,000, 3,000 years ago, 5,000. And then you get, you know, the actual word from the Lord. And I think if you focus on the word of the Lord, you will find a lot of wisdom on how to approach other hurt people or what kind of attitude you should have. So the wisdom is there. It's just broken up into two categories. I don't know why this is in my brain right now, but I just have to say that David should have gone to his daughter when she was raped. And maybe he did, but the Bible doesn't say. And he should have provided some comfort and assurance to her, because here we have an example of a young woman who's gone through something very traumatic, and there's nothing else said about it except for what happened. So that always kind of bothered me. I'm like, well, did he? Lord? You know, I have questions. I'm gonna get up there and ask questions. Okay. Anything else from this chapter? What do you think if you had encountered a young mother? She must have been about 22, and she said, "Oh yeah, the baby's at home." What questions would you want to ask or think to ask?
With who? Or are they alone? My first thought is, crap, does this mean I have to fill out a report?
Yes.
That's my thought, is like, okay, this is neglect, so now we're gonna have to, you know, like for instance, maybe if she brought her older son in to see me and her other son is at home, you know, newborn infant or otherwise even, then now I'm like filing a report on her, but not necessarily for the child that is there with me, but for the child that...
If you have awareness that a child is being harmed, even if you don't know the child, but now you know that that child has been neglected or harmed, and you're a Missouri mandated reporter or whatever state you're in, you are obligated.
Right. Yes.
Part of me is, I'm so confused how this slipped through the cracks. This woman was going to a church and doing like, they had like activities or some kind of thing at the church, and they must have known she had a baby, right? Like that would have come up, you assume. And yet she's showing up, her husband's at work, and she has her 4-year-old. Why did nobody ask? So where's Leon? You know, yeah, you were pregnant 3 months ago. Where's the, 8-month-old baby? Nobody asked, apparently. Or if somebody asked, they didn't have the wisdom or the knowledge to report it.
And also, I think it might be fair to those people to maybe think that they assumed that she had a babysitter, because who would leave a baby at home?
It's true.
So,
It's very shocking.
Like, if I
to
was
realize.
out in the park when she was walking out with her 4-year-old or whatever, and I started a conversation with her, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I've got a baby. He's at home." I'd be like, "Oh, he's with dad. He's with a babysitter. He's with an older sibling. Something."
Yeah.
Like, there's no way he's alone, because nobody does that. So
This is
it's crazy.
This is a great example of why you need to ask all the questions. You can't make assumptions.
Yeah.
You have to ask all of the questions. And it doesn't have to be like some kind of who's taking care of your baby, aggressive or, but just, yeah, oh, that's nice. Who's with the baby? It's a great question to ask. Yep.
And in that case, since you know that she's actively not with her child, would that would be beyond a CPS report, right? You would have to actually call, like, non-emergency police or something like that, right?
You can call for a wellness check.
Wellness check, yeah.
Yep.
That's what I was
I
thinking.
think those are carried out much quicker, but I'm forgetting what the time frame is. Probably same day.
Right.
Yeah, you could if you were worried about the immediate safety of somebody, then a wellness check or like calling the place would be the way to go. Probably also filling out the hotline.
Right. Yeah. You still have to fill that
Yeah.
out. But.
It'd probably be both. Yep.
My first thought when you said that he had no remorse was antisocial personality disorder. And so is that a part of the environmental section of the DSM? Like,
Well,
is that an environmental...
It's an ongoing debate whether disorders like that one are created biologically. Because, like he in the book, Bruce Perry talks about him and Frank, like, they have 50% of the same DNA. Why did Frank turn out fine and Leon turned out dangerous? And, in this case, with the history that we have, it's more than likely that it was environmental for Leon. Because there's no symptoms of, like Frank had the ability to have empathy, like it was all fine on his side. And yet there was huge trauma on Leon's side. So I think Bruce Perry even says in the chapter that if you look at people with the most extreme personality disorders, most of the time, if you dig deep enough, you're going to find an intense or severe trauma somewhere in their history. So, once again, take a very detailed history. Yep. We're going to do some activities tonight. We didn't do one last week because we did stand tray for basically half the class.
That's an activity.
So we're going to probably do 2 tonight, make up for it. Let's do it. Okay. I'm really excited for this one.
It's like when your babysitter pulls out the fun bag, you know what I mean? Or when you're babysitting and you pull out the fun bag.
It's the
And,
fun
like,
bag.
your kids know, like, cognitively associated. the
Last
bag.
time, all I had was pencils, but I did bring markers this time. Okay. You will need several things. So what we're gonna do, not this paper, other paper. I'm picky. I want bigger paper. I want you guys to start by thinking of something that is making you angry in your life.
Billy doesn't have heat.
Really angry.
I was gonna say, how
Yeah.
angry are we? Are we
It
talking
has-
about like my tire burning, or are we talking about more angry than that?
Something that would make you want to hit a punching bag if you have something that makes you that angry.
I was gonna say, what if you're not an angry person?
It can be a little bit old if you don't have anything currently making you angry. Or use colors. Which one you want?
So are we writing or drawing or this one?
You are. It's up to interpretation, but I think drawing is more fun.
Okay.
If you're gonna write it and then draw some other stuff to like really illustrate it. So do a combination.
And we're just drawing like a picture of what we feel,
Fill out the page.
of what makes us angry, like
Mhm.
that prompt, just whatever.
The thing or the person or the situation that is causing you severe anger or frustration.
If you want, I could help you by making you angry. I could like you or something. Oh, okay.
I appreciate it.
And for the online students, I would like you also to do this activity because you can do it with everything that you have at home. So grab a piece of paper and draw a picture of something that makes you angry, situation in your life. Use colored markers or pencils or crayons because it's more fun. And I will give you instructions when I give them instructions. Oh, there's the camera. Don't think too hard, just something that makes you angry. It doesn't have to be a work of art, because heads up, you are going to destroy this.
Yes.
Go.
I love destroying things.
I think if I'm angry about anything.
I'm angry that this class makes me feel.
What?
So I'm angry that this class makes me feel things.
Okay. I was like, what about the class?
Just think about my emotions. That's what I do to other people. People don't do that to me. This is gonna be very big. Ugh.
It's fine, whatever.
This is like a big. Well, you know what? We're gonna just do big because this is my drawing.
angry yet?
I wouldn't say that I'm angry. I don't really get angry very often, but I'm frustrated, so I'm drawing my frustrations.
We accept.
So,
That's fine.
and like, I guess part of the reason I'm not angry enough is because I don't feel like I can get angry about the situation because it's nobody's fault. So,
That's fair. I don't remember if it was exactly anger or frustration that I felt when I was doing this for the first time. But it was enough to do the activity, so it worked.
I literally was ranting to my best friends about this earlier today.
Then you'll be fine.
So, let's see.
I will.
Who was that?
Who's Emily?
Oh, I wish she was sick.
Our Emily?
Oh.
No, Emily Parker.
Oh.
Oh, this is a horrible drawing. It makes no sense. It makes sense to me.
I'm sure that's all we need to know.
I know. I don't know if you can interpret this, but I can.
So what else is?
I'm
trying to think about what else is part of this depiction.
Just draw the color of the feeling.
That also works. Feels moody, which is a deep blue. Is that
Does
you?
it look like me?
I love it.
Be yourself.
Okay. I'm gonna say this, and I mean this, and to say that it doesn't really look like you.
Okay.
It looks like Megamind.
It does. It's so big.
Pink. I would say like red. Yeah.
What color is anger in your mind?
Red.
Red.
My throat's not angry.
Some people do black. There are other options.
It just hurts.
Black. Yeah, black kind of works too.
Black is despair.
That's a good way to say
It's
that.
whatever you want it to be.
It's despair. No.
It's a personal decision. Green's happy for me. It's not green for everyone.
Green is disgust.
If you want it to be.
Well, that's your favorite color, isn't it? You said that. There's some colors that, and that's the thing too. It's like it's not like I don't like disgust. I don't like green. It's just like
You don't like disgust?
when I think about disgust, I think it's green. Yeah, this is my friend. Feeling real. It says disgust is wonderful. Maybe that's what my brain goes to. Yeah. I don't know if I'm frustrated about this enough. I'm like my compartmentalizing brain doesn't want to think about this right now. Like avoiding hard
Oh,
work.
jeez. Everything's fine. I don't know why you guys are looking at me. It's not me. It's fine.
All right. Ready? Okay.
Oh, I see.
There is tape on the end of several tables. Tape it to the wall.
The wall.
Yep. Find a space where you can get about 4 or 5 feet away from it without the table getting in your way.
Aww. Sing.
I didn't bring cups because that was just too much work. So
Are we
grab.
gonna throw wet paper towels at it?
Oh my
we did this in
gosh.
group therapy at House of Hope. I was
Love
not
it.
the people throwing it, but I was watching a bunch of girls throw at.
Now you get to do it. All right, so I did 4 piles of 4 tissues each, depending on how angry you are. You may add to the tissues from the box. Grab your tissues and go get them into individually wet little balls in the bathroom because I did not bring cups, so we'll have to use the sink.
Do you have the energy to be angry about this?
I suppose I do now.
If you're really angry, you can again get more tissues. If you need more than 4 throws.
I might need more than 4 throws just because it's probably not gonna hit.
There's also a little bathroom right in this classroom if you want to use that one.
Oh, that's right.
Does it have running water?
I think
Yes,
so.
it does.
It should. Really.
Should shut them off.
Oh, some nice soap in here, guys.
There's nice
I
stuff.
feel like it'd be weird to pee in my,
This is
Like,
basically what
the
our
classroom?
office. This is our office toilet situation. So I share a toilet with my office neighbor. Right. I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to separate it into random little sections.
There you go.
I just started ripping it.
Yeah.
And
I was a little worried about the peel apart.
you can just blow yours.
All right.
that's funny.
We'll do this as a group, so we'll wait for Zach.
Zach.
Get over
Hurry up.
I'm frustrated with you.
Also, I'm surprised you didn't find
Everyone adds that to your pictures.
I'm surprised
We
you
just
didn't
throw 'em
put,
at Zach.
like, a hallway and like some devos and like some children.
Yeah.
Because that's
Okay.
probably what I would have done if I had done it last year.
I
Maybe
would
the
like you
deans.
to think of the thing that you've drawn and all of the frustration and or anger that you feel towards it, and actually the wetter the better with the tissues. I should have said that. You'll get more oomph.
More
And
stick.
throw your tissues at your
Be
paper.
warmer. Stretching.
Look at her go.
That was pretty
I
good.
really didn't expect that, to be completely honest.
More
Also,
like-
something that's fun with this is that
Yeah, I
sometimes
think I
the
know
marker
more.
will start to bleed and then it'll
does it
cry
stick?
or
Oh my
bleed.
goodness.
I already said bleed, but
It'll only stick if I actually hit it.
I'm honestly so impressed with myself right now.
Okay. Yes. This is legit. Look at that go.
I did not think you
I'm
said
sorry,
legit.
Micaiah. I love you.
I didn't even hit it.
That's all I got for like that.
That's fine.
I swear I love you. I promise I do. Even though I'm throwing this at you.
You can always add more water if you need to.
Oh my gosh! It's splattered.
I feel better.
Cool.
Miss.
Oh, I thought you were saying miss something, and I was like, miss who?
No.
Because actually my prefix is Mrs. now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, girl. Oh, there you go.
Oh, this is what happens when I get
Oh,
sassy and
that's
confident.
This is how I felt axe throwing.
This is a really good activity for kids, but also it's very satisfying as an adult.
It's very satisfying.
I kept trying to think about
Wait, that was the.
what you were having to do.
That was a regulatory sigh. That was good.
I just realized.
You realize what I said?
Why am I getting worse at this?
There
There you go.
Oh, yes! There you went. Good job. Proud of you.
I guess the more I throw like a girl, the more more accurate I am. To lean into my
I
gender.
had 4 pieces.
Nice.
No, I have 5.
Look at that go, girl.
Go as long as you need. Whenever you feel like you've accomplished your mission.
Well, considering my elbow's starting to hurt, I think I should probably.
Throw this at Kara.
I could go home and throw this at my heater. Work! And also our power. So we have these little radiators to make up for the fact that the heater's not working, but the radiators take up a lot of energy. So if you have a lot of other things already plugged into those things, and then you have the radiator plugged in, then your electricity goes out, and you have to do the breaker thingy, and then sometimes your fridge stops working because the electricity went out, and then you have to, make sure your food isn't spoiled. So much fun. I
Do you
love
need to
it.
throw some more?
Maddie, I should have told you before you threw away your thing, but the last step and the fun part is that you can finish by crumpling up your picture and throwing it away.
Oh, my body already knew that was where it was going.
Tear up your sickness deck. Show it who's boss.
That's right.
Name it and clip. I'm just kidding. Just don't do that.
No.
All right, we're gonna take a 15-minute break. So come back at 7:45, which gives you 17 minutes. I like even numbers.
Cool.
Except for that's not an even number. You know what I mean. 15-minute increments.
I got you. I knew what you meant.
All right. What have you noticed with foster children?
Some of my experience, a lot of my experience with them actually comes from Alicia, and that's the child that I would be observing from their family. He's a foster child. But honestly, what surprises me about their kids, the ones that they've had the longest time periods of, at least, it's their first one and this one, and they've just, they are so joyful and fun. I mean, for the most part, they are just kids, and they definitely have some really, really rough paths, but somehow, and I'm not saying that, like, there isn't other cases, right?
Yeah.
But it is interesting to just see how some kids either wait to process it in a negative way, or they just process it in a different way that's not aggressive. But it's just, I don't know, very interesting how normal they are. And I would never, if I was their teacher, I don't think that I would know
That they were in
that
foster
they
care
had
or-
that
Mhm.
past.
Or that they were adopted.
Yeah.
It's not a hard and fast rule, but it is a majority of the time kind of rule that, at least in my experience and from every professional that I've ever spoken to who works with foster kids, there is a marked difference in attachment styles and their response to stress and their triggers to seemingly innocuous things. Foster children most of the time have been through quite a bit. So for the online students, we just watched 2 videos that I linked into in module 3. You'll find a link for this class period, and so watch the one from earlier and then the 2 that I will link for after the break. So what did you guys think of removed?
It was hard to watch. It was really hard to watch. I think the one phrase that she said that stuck out to me the most was, and then when you get something good, you're reminded about how bad everything really is. And that stuck out to me because I could resonate with it personally. So not necessarily like on a clinical level, but like I could totally resonate with what she's saying. Like, felt like, especially when I was in the more traumatized phase of my life, like, it wasn't really even when I experienced a bad thing that was like threw me off. It was when something good attempted to come about that, you know, I was reminded of something good, and then that just reminded me of all the other things that were just horrible about the experience that I was in. And it was like just those little things, and it was seemingly innocuous things too, like, for instance, the girl, you know, in the dress,
Yeah.
you know, and the foster mom doesn't have any clue why this dress. So then
No
from a
context. Yep.
counselor perspective, if I'm watching that in like a client in an office or something, and I feel like I would have, you know, before thinking through what we've kind of talked about, like, I don't know if I would have like recognized to think, dress, I wonder why she experienced that way. I'd be like, oh, she's just, you know, super on edge about a dress, like, that's kind of weird. But like, to wonder and have curiosity, like, as a foster mom or whatever, like, I wonder why she's doing that, you know. And to even like, maybe if you were the mom, to ask that question, be like, later on when she's like a little, you know, more calmed down, I'd be like, I wonder why you were upset about the dress.
Yeah, if I were the foster mom, if I had a child and the child that I had a big reaction, foster child, to something that seemed mundane to me and that I had no idea why this caused a reaction, not in the moment, because in the moment she's dysregulated. She is having flashbacks to something that was traumatic for her. But in a moment when her system is regulated and is calm and she can talk to you, I guess there's like times to ask and times not to ask, and you have to have wisdom about that. But if it's a time to ask and the kid is willing and has a safe relationship with you and is willing to talk about it, then that's an opportunity for you to not run away from a hard conversation, to be a safe person, for them to unload about something that they've been remembering and feeling bad about. So, there are a lot of things in that video that are very, like, common occurrences. So, like, the trash bag that the child is carrying around is a very undignified, and almost, I would say, like, it fills them with shame to not have a piece of even luggage or a bag that belongs to them. All they're given is a trash bag, which, if you think about that from the child's perspective, it's probably most of the time communicating what? I'm a piece of trash. That's all I deserve is a trash bag. So my favorite part of this video is the end, when the foster mom is a healthy enough person to decide, this child is in my care, this child is having a reaction to something, what is my response going to be? And she doesn't run away from the relationship with her foster daughter. She looks for a way to bring safety and assurance that she is safe and in a stable home to the relationship by bringing her brother into the picture. So then there's actually a second video if you guys have 20 minutes and want to watch the second one and be emotional. The second video shows that the foster mom has both children for a while. So. Yes. So I have some questions and signs of attachment that we can look at to assess the level of attachment that a child has, and I thought that might be helpful because we've been talking about different attachment styles and in cases of negative attachment, not positive attachment. So here is for birth to 1 year. The questions or the things you can assess in the child would be, does the child appear alert? Does the child respond to humans? Does the child show interest in the human face? Does the child track with his eyes? And I have this, I can scan this and give this to you guys, so if you don't want to write down every single thing, I will send this to you guys, the module. Does the child vocalize frequently? Exhibit expected motor development? Enjoy close physical contact? Exhibit discomfort? Appear outgoing, or is he or she passive and withdrawn? Does the child have good musical tone? So those are questions you can look at for the child.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah,
Does the child have good musical tone?
I don't remember.
Does that mean I have a bad
More.
attachment style if I have a poor
can't
musical
sing?
tone?
I think this is not a hard and fast rule. But for some, like if you're pairing this with 5 other things or 6 other things, that maybe it might be part of that law. So, but it's not. I wouldn't say that last one is a hard and fast rule.
Do you think it's because, like, in, like, usually happy and healthy homes,
They sing along.
they're singing
Yeah,
a
I
lot,
think
they're
so.
having happy, fun music?
Yeah, mom sings to baby can, like, mimic kind of the thing.
Yeah. So that you're learning because your parents are interacting and talking and singing with you a lot.
Yeah, whereas you can't, like... Interesting.
Yeah.
That would not have been one that my brain would have thought.
It must occur more often than not, but I don't think it's a hard and fast rule because not everybody's musical. Okay. For the parent, from birth to 1 year, the questions you'd be looking at is, does the parent respond to the infant's vocalizations? Change voice tone when talking to the infant or about the infant? Oh, you cute little baby. You know, that is not actually. I was like, that's
Like,
not
is that your
even
baby
accurate,
voice?
Mariah. Hey, what do? I'm trying to like step into like being auntie. Like, how do I talk to them? I don't know, but I have a voice specifically for my nieces and nephews. Show interest in face-to-face contact with the infant. Exhibit interest in and encourage age-appropriate discomfort. Respond to the child's indications of discomfort. Show the ability to comfort the child. Initiate positive interactions with the child. Enjoy close physical contact with the child. Identify plus or negative qualities in child that remind parent of another family member. Okay, so that's birth to 1 year. Now we're going to look at 1 to 5. So this is going to be a little bit older. So you might even think about when you do your observation project, this one might be a great handout to look at if you're looking at 1 to 5. And then we also have grade school, so we have a little bit older. For the child, explore environment in a normal way. Respond to parents. Keep him or herself occupied in a positive way. Seem relaxed and happy. Have the ability to express emotions. React to pain and pleasure. Engage in age-appropriate activity. Respond appropriately to separation from parent. Respond appropriately to parent's return. So one video talked about the parent coming back in and them engaging the child's response. Use speech appropriately. Express frustrations. Respond to parental limit setting. Exhibit observable fears. React positively to physical closeness. Exhibit body rigidity or relaxation. Does the parent encourage physical closeness with child? Show interest in child's development? Respond to child's overtures? Use appropriate disciplinary measure? Comfort the child in a positive way? Initiate positive interactions with child? Accept expressions of autonomy? See the child as taking after someone. Is this a positive or negative thing? Do any of those make you think of a child that you know in your life?
One of my students totally comes into my brain. Oh my goodness. And then I also saw how she interacted with mom, which now that I'm thinking about it, I saw that video, I'm like, I don't know if that's biomom. I don't think it is. If it is, then she's very avoidantly attached. Very avoidantly attached.
The child or the mom?
Mom to the child. Or either way, same thing. Child to mom.
There are multiple reasons why a biomom would exhibit a not secure attachment style with their child.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been the trauma of the birth. Like, these things do pop up when you're doing case consultations. Maybe something happened around that child's infancy, like they were left alone, their husband passed away, or child was sick a lot. So like interacting with the child because of how often, how badly they were sick became a negative thing, and the mom did not have whatever internal skills and tools to maintain a positive view of the child. Instead, they begin to blame the child. There are a lot of different reasons why biomom could develop a less secure attachment with her child.
Yeah, I mean,
or maybe like Virginia doesn't have the skills. Just wasn't there at all.
We were in her baptism class, and mom was just like, "Yeah, I'm here for Brandley's baptism class." I said her name. Sorry. Anyway, I'm here.
Just
for her.
don't say what church.
I'm here for her baptism class, and just super monotone, straight, and toxic independence of the child, extremely so.
That sounds like a mom problem. Kind of like Bruce Perry walked into the room to do a case consultation on Laura, but where was the original issue? Was Virginia's childhood history. Grew up in foster homes. She didn't know how to attach to her child. So I would just, like, without knowing anything else, my best guess would be that mom never learned or didn't learn enough about attachment and how to be a mother to be warm towards her child. And so we can, if we don't go to therapy, just be a copy of our parents, copy of our childhood.
Right. Interesting.
Anyone else? Think about any kids that you know, and then try to think about the attachment style that they have with their parents. What can you bring to mind?
The only one I can really think of is my husband's cousin's kid. And I would say that he and his mom probably have a pretty secure attachment. He feels, he's, like 3, 2 or 3. And he feels comfortable, exploring his world with family nearby, and knows mom is nearby, but he's independent, but he still loves mama, and she receives him warmly, and
she's base, but he feels fine going out and exploring.
Yeah, and she's funny because like sometimes she's like really just like straight faced with him, and it's like what are you doing? Like just like really nonchalant with him. But then other times she's so peppy with him, and the way that he responds is very cute whenever she gets excited with him. Yeah.
I don't think being like talking to your child sometimes
it's
as like a logical human being is a bad thing.
No.
As long as you are a warm mother anytime that is needed. Yeah. So that when they're needing the affection or the, especially when they're babies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once they're toddlers and children, like it's a mix.
I remember when I was a kid, and I guess I had reached the point of being aware of when adults talk to children in a different tone, and my brother would still talk to me. He's 7 years older than me. He would still talk to me in that tone, and I was like, what are you doing? Like, this is why you're talking to me like I'm a baby. And I remember being so annoyed, and at that point in my life I was like, I'm never going to talk to children with a tiny little baby voice, because I hate it. And now I'm kind of like, okay, well.
In some cases,
It's fine.
Yeah. It's part of attachment.
Yeah.
Sounds like he has good, secure attachment with his mom.
Yeah, so. What kind of attachment style is it when a kid doesn't like being away from mom? Like, mom is safe and mom is good and it is home base, but the child is like really nervous about exploring the world.
Say that again.
Ambivalent?
I don't think ambivalent.
Because they're clingy?
I would say anxious.
Okay. That was me growing. Did not like being away from my mom.
Forgot what I was going to say. I literally used an example in a conversation with another professional, how even children as old as 12 can have a really healing experience if they have a safe person that comes in their life, because of our conversation last week. I thought about that when I was doing a case consultation the other day. So thank you for that recent example that just popped in my head. I was like, it's possible. I know someone who did it.
Yeah, it totally is. Yeah.
Would you guys like to hear about one of my current clients?
Always.
Okay. So this little girl just started with me, and she's anxious. That's basically the reason that she's come to therapy. So her mom came in with her for the first session, and we were hanging out in the playroom, and I asked her if she'd like to do a sand tray, and she said yes. So we did a sand tray, and sand tray makes me so happy in one way, because you will never see the exact same tray twice. And also, you can see some really strange things. And this was one of them where I was like, I've just never seen this one. And I'm still not sure what to think about it, so I'm probably going to process it with my supervisor. But this little girl did a sand tray where she took animals and she put them like in a circle around a mound, and then she put some treasure under the mound, and there were diamonds and jewels. And then she had a little figure that was her, as a little person, and she began to do this scenario where she had to get past the butterflies and the animals in this tray to get to the gold and jewels and rescue it, or, you know, steal it from the animals. And then she decides to, and this was the part where I was like, just very like, I cannot, like, cannot show emotions right now. I've got to just let her play this out. Used a baby to distract the animals, and then the animals ate the baby.
Oh.
Yeah, and
Did the baby represent a baby?
the baby represented a baby.
Okay.
It was a baby and it represented a baby.
Okay.
And she said, she literally was just like, yep, and so, you know, this is the trick to get them over here, and so like the lion, the tiger, and whatever the other, a donkey, went over here, and she's like, and they're gonna eat the baby, and then, you know, like the girl was going under the sand to get the treasure, and then they came back from being on break when they were eating the baby, and came back over and continued guarding the mound, and I was just like, yep. So
Does she have
What do you
any
guys think?
siblings?
she does have siblings. Mm-hmm. What assumption would you come to? I mean, I came to several assumptions during that tray.
That she doesn't like her younger siblings.
Oh, younger siblings?
Does she have any? Oh, that her
I
older
have
siblings
two
don't
new
like
kids
her.
that are both anxious, and they started the same week. Brother, but she has, I think, two siblings that are close in age to her. Like one, I think maybe one before and after, but not baby.
Because my first thought is,
She has a baby in her life that she hates.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's
or
the most literal
or
interpretation.
That
like
would be, yeah,
actually
literal.
the way I took it was maybe even more literal in that maybe she feels like she needs to use her younger sibling to get what she wants or something, or it's an older sibling thing that they've done that to her, or that her, like what Zach said, of like, or maybe her older siblings not liking her.
Yeah.
She wasn't the baby though. She had a figure, and the
Right,
figure was
that's
being
right.
called by her own name. So she was third personing her figure.
I wonder why she had to dig under the sand.
Well, what was it? She talked about the gold and the jewels that she was stealing, and the reason why she was stealing it was because she was hungry. And she would bring it to her mother and give the gold and the jewels to her mother, and she was like providing basically. So
like,
there was like
food
to me,
insecurity.
yeah, there was a huge insecurity. I am not secure. I do not have what I need, so I've got to steal it and get it however I can. But like I was like, that all makes sense with like the anxious child that her mom has been telling me about. But the part that I was like, I need more information was when she killed the baby.
Yeah.
She sacrificed an infant to feed the animals, and it was very nonchalant.
Like no nothing, no affect change, nothing.
She was not sad for the baby. There was no like, none of that. So, if my supervisor has a magic answer for me on this one, I'll bring it back and let you guys know.
I would be so curious, like the demographic. That's one of those where I feel like you would need to go into a further history because you're kind of like,
This family, I think on paper, probably looks great.
really?
2-parent home, 2 kids, both parents are professionals, they're stable,
Like, has she seen something like this?
She
go
has no trauma and she has no abuse. What she does have is, and this is why we ask lots of questions, and this is one of those questions that a lot of parents will say no to, but for this child, this was the beginning of her anxiety, was when she heard about the Texas shooting, and she, I think this is like last May, she became very anxious after that, and so anything that potentially could be a danger, she is now very anxious about. So, for instance, she's been to Hawaii. She loved Hawaii. She had fun in Hawaii. But then she went to school and found out about volcanoes. She found out Hawaii has a volcano. So now this little girl is afraid of ever going back to Hawaii because there are volcanoes. So that's the kind of anxiety she's experiencing, is like, will my school have a school shooting like the other school?
There is like an association with the fear there.
She is very anxious about the worst case scenario things happening.
What's the age range, or age if you can even tell us that or not?
7, 8.
Oh,
Nope.
so that's old enough to tell very thought through story and analyze story.
It was. It really was. She
'Cause I-
went on for about 30 minutes at least in this story, where she repeatedly, about 3 or 4 times, at the end I said, I think she, the figure, stole the treasure about 3 or 4 times, and she was like, no, I think it was 2. I'm like, child, I think that was 4, like, let's not, you did that like 4 times. So she went through the same thing, and there were multiple guards, and it was kind of funny, like, what are you watching? Because she described the security guard watching monitors and how he didn't do a good job, so then he had to go to his boss's, like, it was like, this is big people conversation. I don't know where you must have been either watching a show or listening to mom or dad talk about work.
That reminds me of a conversation that I had in elementary school when we were talking about like active shooter stuff, and it was a very like high level conversation, about the people who go and watch security and things like that. So I wonder if it's a school like conversation rather than like a home conversation that's happening. That's why mom doesn't really understand the association, because I know that every time a shooting, like a school shooting happened or some sort of mass shooting happened in school, like the entire time we were in school, we would like digest it as a classroom in some classroom.
Yeah.
And some teachers would go into more graphic detail, and some teachers wouldn't.
Yep. Well, the reason why she found out about the shooting was because of her school. She found out at school. So then she came home and asked mom a lot of questions, and mom does not feel comfortable lying, so she answered her questions as honestly as she could. So when I did the first session with mom, some of what we talked about was coaching on how she could answer the questions in a way that was both true and honest and create a sense of safety for her. So what I recommended was, honey, I know, it's scary to hear about school shootings. There are safer schools and there are less safe schools. And mom and dad are always going to choose a safer school for you. So talking about like, can she promise to her daughter that she's never going to experience a school shooting? No, because we can't read the future and we don't know what's going to happen. Can she say, we've made the best, safest decision for you? Yes. And that creates a sense of safety. So for whatever reason, this little girl has developed a lot of fears and feels very insecure, even though she feels safe in her family. So there's some question there for me as I work with this case. Am I going to find out some other trauma, some other thing that's created a sense of unsafety? But
So, do you think her mom answers all her questions like that?
mom is pretty technical.
Like, Mom, there's a volcano in Hawaii. If we go back, are we gonna die? Well, maybe, honey. You know? 'Cause, like,
Mom
that could
answered
be-
it more like, yes, there's a volcano in Hawaii, but there are scientists who study that volcano, and they know in advance when that volcano is active, and the volcano is not active right now. So
That's the mother's answer.
that was
That's-
closer to it, yeah.
That's
Okay.
pretty high level for a 7-year-old.
This 7-year-old asks very technical questions.
So she's smart too.
She's a very smart little girl, yes.
Okay.
How bad does a child's case of whatever it is that they're coming in for therapy usually have to get for a parent to consider taking their child to therapy? Because in my mind, it's crazy to me that it's interesting to me to hear how popular
Therapy.
child therapy is. 'Cause I feel like most
I
parents
really
would
see a
think to-
variety. I can give you some different examples for intake reasons. This is why I brought my child to therapy. This child is so stressed all the time. So that's why her mom brought her to therapy. She's like, I don't want this to get worse. I don't want her to always be anxious and fearful and stop going places. So we want to deal with this now. So that's why she brought her to therapy. So, not every parent is going to see that as reason enough, but parents who value mental health and are like, let's deal with it now rather than later when it's worse, it's now versus later is actually pretty good reasoning in my mind for dealing with things at a younger age. I've also had parents bring kids in because their kid was out of control, aggressive, or angry. So one of my first clients was a kid who at 9 was just very, very angry, and it was scaring mom a little bit, and it was scaring the family how angry verbally he was getting. So she brought him into therapy, and we worked on attachment, and we worked on anger management skills and emotional regulation and emotional identification. And then I had another kid who was also brought in for anger and aggression, and the big thing that sticks in my mind when I look back at that case was that he charged at mom one time when he was really angry, and it scared her because she had a surgery recently, so one side of her shoulder was weak and she was afraid she could have got knocked over. So it's not always severe trauma. Sometimes it's just for whatever reason this kid does not have good control over their emotions, and parents don't know how to manage the parenting anymore. They don't know what to do to help their kid at home without some outside help. So it becomes about teaching skills and emotional regulation and parent coaching. I've also had kids brought in for more severe things. I've had plenty of kids with sexual or trauma or, just the various ones. But one that, this one was like, this is why you don't do that. This is why this isn't a good idea. But a little boy was brought in by his mother after he had done some sexual exploration with one of his friends. He was 9, I think. And the reason why that was even something on his mind, or that he'd seen it modeled, was because he went to a different friend's house. And at that friend's house, his parents just thought it was normal to walk around without clothes on. And they would do that all the time. So I think I asked very specifically whether his friend or the child that was brought in to see me had viewed any porn, because that was one of the things I was worried may have been a trigger. And I think maybe mom said something like it was possible that this little boy that was friends with her son had been exposed to porn. So friend, introduced her son to the idea of taking clothes off and some level of sexual exploration. And then he went to his other friend's house, and he talked to her, and they took off their clothes, and her parents came in and flipped out. But they were very close friends with his parents, so they talked about it, and that they came to this peaceful, conclusion to that conversation. It wasn't like they weren't taking them to court or anything. But that's why that little boy was brought in to see me. There's a lot of different reasons, and I'm not always prepared for I haven't heard all of them yet, so every time I hear a new one, I'm like, I just did not know that happened. So be prepared. So I think the original question is, what are some of the reasons, and what is a low-level reason, or borderline, maybe you don't need therapy reason?
Yeah, I guess. Not in that I don't think that everyone can
Benefit?
It surprises me. I would think, from my limited knowledge of the general population of parents,
Yes.
I do think that parents nowadays, in general, are probably way different than even my parents were.
Yes.
And so when I think about it, I think about, my parents and their friends and the way that we were all raised.
Mm-hmm.
And so from their perspective, I don't think they would have ever considered counseling for me at the age of younger than probably 10
Yeah.
to go to counseling because I'm anxious. They probably, my parents in particular probably would have just said I was sensitive. In fact, they did call me sensitive because that's all they knew of the framework.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think until before this class, I would have thought the only reason that a child would have gone to counseling is because of like severe trauma, or like even maybe a little like just some type of trauma, not just anger issues or
Yeah.
things that maybe could consider like it's almost like counseling for the parent too,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
My very next thought was that the difference that I see between, say, 15, 20 years ago parents and these parents is that they're taking their kids to counseling more often. The thing that I think hasn't totally changed is that not all parents are ready to say, I might be part of the problem,
Yeah.
tell me what to do, or help me out.
Yeah.
That's the
Right.
part where I have to tread softly, but I do have to tread, because if you don't change the home environment or the parenting style or alter the typical format of the relationship between the child and the parent, might be that nothing's going to change and that you're wasting your money. Because giving the child a place to process is as important as it is to work with the parent and change the home environment. So like if you had worked with Laura and given her enough therapy to learn that her parent wasn't a good attachment figure, but didn't change the fact that Virginia wasn't a good attachment figure, well, you've given Laura some tools, but you haven't changed her home, you haven't changed her the situation that's reoccurring every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick before we end class, let's talk about the observation of children assignment, because some in-class students had some questions. One of the questions for you guys online, we're not here tonight, is what is the age range that we should be looking at for this assignment? So, like we talked about assessing attachment. I think a year and a half is year and a half is a good minimal. But if you're going to do one observation on a child that's a year and a half, please do your second observation on a totally different age so that you can see a child who's more developed, or their attachment style is more concrete than the child who's basically still an infant. So, and the other specified question is, are we looking at the same child for those two different settings? And my answer was, the way I intended this assignment and the way when I wrote it is that you're doing two totally different observations. So you're doing one, say, with your sister's family at her home, and you're doing one at church with some friends from church. So different groups of kids, different settings. Does that answer? Do you have other questions?
The top end of the age.
If you go 12 or higher, you're really more dealing with a preteen, and you're not going to get as much like child interaction. So I think if you stick under 10, you're going to get more of a true child interaction.
What if the group is between like 10 and 12?
You're just going from, and it's not like the same for every child. You might get a child who's 10 and they really act like a preteen. You know, they're really already in that phase, or you might get a 10-year-old who's really still pretty much in that child phase. But once you get into 11, 12, you're really dealing with more of a preteen, and they're moving into the stage where they're not as attached to parents and they're more interested in becoming their unique individual selves. For the purposes of this assignment, you really want a child. Hopefully, at least one of the children you observe will be kind of in the 3 to 7 range, because that is a true child. That is a child who's developing their attachment style, and we're also this is going to pair nicely with your developmental stages assignment. So remember to when you are getting ready to this assignment, you might want to do a little of your research for the developmental stages ahead of time so you have that in your head when you're observing the children. Like, what stage are they in? What would be normal skills for this child to have, that kind of thing. What other question? Yeah, go ahead.
So if I can't, if like out of the two options I have like, you know, someone that does fit into the acceptable range, and then I have the 10 to 12-year-old group, and then I focus on the kids that are more, that have kind of a younger.
How old is the oldest child?
12.
Have you already like arranged with the family?
No, but it's like,
Hard to
it's
find
a group
opportunities?
setting at church, so. And
if
I
you-
don't know I don't really know any other children, so.
Yeah. See, this is a hard assignment because it's like what's available, what do you have access to? I would say if you can find someone who is really more in the child range and not the adolescence range, that's going to be a lot better for this class and this assignment and what we're learning. But if you literally can't find anyone else and a 12-year-old is all you got, make do. But it would be the most appropriate for the assignment to find a child in that range if you can. And like you can learn a lot from a littler kid, so 2-year-olds are fine, just not only 2-year-olds. Variety is good. So maybe the nursery, if they let you hang out in the nursery and learn something.
That sounds creepy. Hang out in the nursery.
Please get permission and do the background checks that they request of you.
I was hanging out in the nursery. It's my turn.
I noticed.
That's why friends are great,
Yeah.
because they'll just bring you over for dinner and you can hang out with their children and talk to the parents.
The unfortunate thing about being a college student is that most of your friends aren't in that spot yet.
All of my friends are in that spot. This is not a you versus me thing. I'm just like, oh yeah, I remember that. Now all my friends are married with kids.
I'm entering that phase. It's weird.
Yeah, it's very weird. Okay, any other questions about the assignments or the binder? This is a good time to touch on it. Is anyone in the class planning on turning in their binder virtually versus physically?
Is that an option?
If that works better with your brain and you let me know ahead of time that that's how it's going to be turned in.
Okay.
But I like the physically for the in-person students because you get to take it with you and it doesn't get lost in your computer as a file as many of my assignments did. Do I still have my binders? All of them. And they're in a box and it's organized and it's beautiful. So,
I feel that.
yeah, if you can turn in things in a binder at the end, you will get to take it with you and have it. And it's wonderful. So, I think that's it. Unless you guys have any other questions. There's the developmental stages paper, binder. It's all on here at the end. I do, again, want to remind you guys to work on stuff throughout the class and not leave it all to the end because it's only stressful if you do it at the end. Please do your reading. And for online students, we talked about this before we started class. But on Canvas, on the modules, I'm not grading individual reading assignments. But at the end, I will be assessing whether you completed your reading each week, whether you turned in your assignments, and that does factor into your binder grading. So please do your reading, and please keep track of that throughout the class period. And then that will be one of the things that I will ask you at the end of class is to report your reading and how completed it was each week. So please keep track of that, and remember it will be graded at the end in your binder, as everything will be encompassed in that binder from the entire class. So some things get individual grades, like the case study notes and the articles and the reading reflections all get graded throughout the class, but then them being in the binder is also part of your grade.
Okay, so we need to be able to print out the journals and the case studies to put in our binder.
Everything in this class will go in the binder.
Okay.
Every single thing that you completed, however small, except for like the practice quiz at the beginning,
Okay.
will go in the binder.
Because I tend to delete. I reuse my Google Docs. So
It's still here.
Yes, it is.
You should
but
be
I
able.
just-
If you can't get a copy on your end, I should be able to somehow get a copy to you from my
Okay.
end, one way or the other. But don't tell me last minute, because there's no promise that if I'm working, I'm gonna be able to stop and print all those off for you or send them to you. So, check on that throughout class and maybe start saving them as you go.
Yeah.
Copy them into a different folder, like copy and paste it, and then you can just have one thing of all your
That's
reading
what I
assignments.
did for my
There you go.
senior project.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Good night. Bye, guys. Watch the videos online that I will post.